Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of FECast, the official podcast of Friends in Eternal. I am honored to be joined by Camomilk, a member of FE. Say hello, Camomilk.
Well, hello. It's good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
He's been a member of our team and been helping out for the ECQ preparation. Today, we have a lot to talk about. This episode is being recorded just after we got news about a balance patch, and I think that balance patch is live now, but I haven't had an opportunity to play it. So we'll be talking about the patch notes and what the implications are going to be for the format moving forward. We also have the last ECQ next weekend, so if you are hoping to qualify for Eternal Worlds, this will be your last chance unless you're already qualified for one of the showdowns that they have, and we'll be talking a little bit about that later as well. Also, the rollback on drop campaigns happened last Friday, and we'll go into that a little and see how things are shaping up in a post-drop campaign world. And finally, Sunny's not having it. I'll be talking about the new promo. I always screw up the name. Is it Moktani?
I want to say Moknati. No, it's Moktani, I guess. Yeah, that sounds right.
Whoa. Hold your horses there, past Sunyveil. This is Editing Sunyveil, and I'd just like to apologize for all the times that we mispronounce Moknati's name, because clearly we didn't know how to pronounce the name correctly during the episode. Alright, bear with us as we struggle through this, and I'm going to send it back to past Sunyveil and camomilk. Alright, I'll be talking about Moktani, the new promo, and card evaluation skills, especially when it comes to late game control finishes. Alright, before we get started talking about the patch notes, Camomilk, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Alright, well, thank you. I am Camomilk. I go by Camomilk in game and in chat, and I started playing Eternal a couple years ago, right before the Crownwatch Paladin nerf, actually, which or later. So I've been playing for a few years. I've played in a couple of ECQ tournaments and a couple of the ETS tournaments, although I haven't managed to make it to the finals, like the top 8 or the top 64 of any of those, but I'm still trying.
You were pretty close a couple of months ago, right?
The ECQ, I've done 2 ECQs so far. I missed last month, so I went 16 and 12, and then I went 17 and 11 the next time I did it. So just a little bit out of reach.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you'll get there. Well, maybe not this season, but unless they can competitive Eternal entirely, which seems, unlikely and really bad for everyone. I think that's something that we're all actively hoping against. I'm sure you'll get there one of these days. Do you have any card game experience prior to Eternal?
Prior to Eternal, I did play some Magic the Gathering. I didn't really play competitively. I played get some friends together and do a draft or do some sealed or play Commander. And I tried out Hearthstone a bit. I went back to Magic after Hearthstone because it didn't really scratch that itch for me. But when I found Eternal, it did scratch that itch for me. I really liked the gameplay and the depth to it. So
yeah, I have a very similar story. Hearthstone not being able to interact with your opponent on their turn, I think, was a big turnoff for me coming from Magic. And of course, Eternal lets you do that to some degree.
Okay. Yeah, that was definitely one of the key elements.
Yeah, let's get into some of these patch notes, because I think there are some pretty big implications for these. This isn't just one card being changed. This is a pretty wide swath of changes. So first we have a bunch of buffs that are actually rollbacks of previous nerfs. We've got Argenport Instigator becoming easier to play now. It's just 2 with 1 shadow requirement instead of double shadow. There's Crownwatch Paladin, which is now a 2/2. Before it was a 2/1. Crownwatch Paladin, especially, was a card that you saw a lot, especially in Rakano aggro decks before its nerf, and pretty much just dropped off the face of the earth as soon as it got nerfed to a 2/1. We also have Desert Marshal is now a 2/2. It was a 2/1 before, and back when it was a 2/2, it was seeing a ton of play, just being able to ambush small units and survive, and it was just all over the place in Combrite type decks. We also have Rakano Artisan becoming a 2/2. I don't think this is going to be that big of an issue because it's not seeing much play now, and the body size was never a big deal for it. And we have Champion of Chaos. I think this is the big one. Now Champion of Chaos gets +1/+1 for each mode instead of just +1/+0. So you could have a turn 3 5/5 Champion of Chaos if things line up for you. What do you think about these changes, Camomilk?
Living the dream.
What are the implications for?
This is Really, really interesting, I guess. There are 3 cards that went from a stat line of 2-1 to 2-2. Seeing that's like a stat line that just they seem to pick as something that they wanted for some of these 2-drops. More into my opinion on that when we talk about some of these Stone Scar changes, but I think it might have some relation there. The Argenport Instigator and Champion of Chaos, both cards go really well into a Stone Scar deck. And of course, back in the day, before these cards were, now they're being buffed back to their former glory. Stone Scar was really a top tier deck back then. I think, didn't you even take down some tournaments with a Stone Scar aggro type deck?
Yes, I don't remember what stage in the nerf process things were back then, but yeah, I did win an ETS Invitational with Stone Scar, Champion of Chaos, just using Rapid Shot to get that damage. And now that Champion of Chaos is back to its original stat line, it's going to be a lot scarier, and if you compare it with Quick Draw, whether that be from Bandit Queen or Rapid Shot, it's going to represent a ton of damage and be really difficult to deal with unless you have removal for it right away.
Sure, that's definitely a scary card. It's maybe a little less scary now than it used to be, now that we have Defiance as a potential answer.
Yeah,
but
I think that there are a few things at play here. New cards such as Defiance. There's also a lot more competition at the 3 slot than there used to be, with all the merchants running around and all the displays as well. But Champion of Chaos, interestingly, is in a faction pair that doesn't have its own smuggler, right? If you're playing a Stone Scar deck, you're either playing a Fire Market or a Shadow Market, you're not playing a Black Market. So because of that lack of competition in that slot, I think that this Champion of Chaos buff is going to make it really shine. And I think that we're going to see maybe not oppressive Stone Scar aggro like we did back in the day, but a viable Stone Scar aggro deck. If you recall, I don't know where this is in relation to the Crown Watch Paladin nerf, but right when Eternal came out of open beta, became in open beta, I think, when it got released to open beta, is when Stone Scar really shined. Stone Scar decks were absolutely everywhere, and some people were even splashing Justice for Righteous Fury out of their Stone Scar decks, and that was largely on the back of cards like Champion of Chaos and Argenport Instigator, curving 2-3 Argenport Instigator and Champion of Chaos.
Yeah, and that's going to be a force to reckon with in the meta, I think. People are going to be trying out these Stone Scar decks, seeing what they can do.
Yeah, so how do you feel about the non-Stone Scar decks, the non-Stone Scar cards that are being buffed to the original glory that are mentioned here? The Crown Watch Paladin, Desert Marshal, and Recano Artisan.
Well, I am kind of excited about some of these. Recano Artisan is probably the least impactful, like you mentioned, but it kind of gets me the most excited because I have been brewing around with Recano Artisan a bit, seeing if I can get an armory deck to work in sort of an Ikaria blue shell. So I'm excited to keep experimenting with that. Crown Watch Paladin and Desert Marshal, these both, like Desert Marshal tends to play a role in a more controlling deck, and Crown Watch Paladin in a more aggressive war cry. So it's interesting that their toughness is buffed. And I wonder, going back to what you were saying about how Stone Scar aggro used to be everywhere. Remember, Frontier Jito was a card where that's a card that it gives all of your 1-drops charge. And so there were these decks that were playing Stone Scar Grenadin and Assembly Line and Rally and just trying to overwhelm you just super fast. And I wonder if some of these buffs are maybe looking to the future and hoping that that doesn't get to be too much of a thing, because now these cards can block those Grenadins.
That's a pretty good point. I don't think we're seeing the return of Jito because its cost was doubled. It went from 1 to 2 without a change in its effect. So I don't think we're going to see a lot of that card specifically, but these really low to the ground, these cards become countermeasures to the really fast Stone Scar deck. Yeah, we'll see if Stone Scar becomes popular enough that being attacked by Grenadin drones becomes an issue, and then we'll see if these cards are appropriate countermeasures. One thing I want to mention is that Crown Watch Paladin has a lot of competition at the 2-drop slot, because you have the Highland Sharpshooter and Champion of Glory and Hojan all that cost 2, and I would say that all of them are probably better than Crown Watch Paladin. Paladin might be better than Hojan in an aggressive deck, I'm not sure, but it seems like the bar for a 2-drop in a Recano aggro deck is really high, and that's the type of deck that I'd expect Crown Watch Paladin to make its way into.
It is That's a good point. It is like there are a lot of really strong 2-drops. I feel like right now a lot of them are answered, well, snowballs and with Stone Scar coming out, Vara's Favor might be seeing a lot of play. So there are a lot of cards that deal 1 damage to answer things like Hojin or the little Ikaria
Yeah.
flyer. And Chronowatch Paladin at least gives you something that is more resilient to that type of answer.
Yeah, I guess at the very least, it gives you a way to diversify what you're weak to rather than all the good 2-drops being weak to the same. All right, let's talk
Sure.
about a few more of these buffs. Flame Blast
Okay.
is essentially being rolled back to its original glory. Now it's 1 fire, fire, fire. What that means is that the amount of power you spend on Fire Blast is now equal to the amount of damage. It's templated in a weird way such that it's kind of confusing, but the way it was previously templated, it says that the amount of damage you do is equal to the amount of power you spend on it minus 1. And also, Treachery is now able to hit sites. And I think that's a really interesting one, and one that I'm actually kind of scared about. Both of these cards are favored in the everything goes to face strategy, right? Have you ever played a deck like that?
I have played a few burn decks, yeah, and I definitely get a lot of satisfaction out of just throwing a big flame blast at their face to finish them off.
Yeah, if anyone knows about my roots when it comes to Magic the Gathering, they'll know that I like my red decks. And as much as I like playing them, I certainly don't want them to be that good, because one of the big things about that made Stone Scar such a boogeyman back in the day is that they would play, 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, and then 2, Bandit Queen and attack with everything. And then maybe you'd be able to stabilize after that. Maybe you play a sweeper or something like that. But then they just hit you with an Obliterate and a Flame Blast, and the game's over anyway. So having Flame Blast be better, and even Treachery, a card that I've played in these types of burn decks, everything goes to the face decks, makes me a little worried, honestly, that this type of strategy might be good again. It's not something that I particularly enjoy having be good in the metagame, if you will.
See how it shakes out. I'm interested because there's also a lot more lifesteal going around now.
That's true.
So I'm not sure how that's going to shake out. It'll be fun to watch.
Yeah. Treachery? So, first of all, actually, let's talk about this. Flame Blast can hit sites, right? Flame Blast, unlike Torch and Obliterate, can hit sites. And I wonder if they mentioned that part of this change was to make it so that you could answer sites more easily, right? Putting Treachery and Flame Blast in the same category, saying that both of them can hit sites now. How much do you think that Flame Blast is going to be targeting sites as opposed to the opposing player? Like, do you think that Flame Blast now becomes a control card that you can use to answer sites when you have a game plan that goes big? Or do you think that it's just being buffed as additional face damage?
That's a good. I mean, I think it's mostly the face damage effect. I think if you're running Flame Blast in your deck, you want to be able to finish them off with a big burn spell. And
Yeah,
if you're running control cards and you want to answer sites, I think there's probably better answers, like even Casualties of the Cause, for example.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that when you're playing Flame Blast, you want Flame Blast to be the last card that you play, much like in Magic, right? Same card. Flame Blast, sacrifice 2 mountains, 4 damage to target creature or player. You want that to be the last card you play in the game, because it takes up your entire turn.
Yeah, for sure.
As far as Treachery, being able to hit sites go, that I feel like a lot of the time when you're playing Treachery, cards like Treachery, you don't care about the sites too much for the same reason that Flame Blast will go face. I feel like Treachery is still a card that you want to play when you're being really aggressive and your game plan involves burning them out at some point. And in that case, most of the sites are bad on defense anyway, so being able to hit sites doesn't seem like a huge deal. Maybe there's some sort of Stone Scar control deck, but even then, those decks tend to be pretty good against things like sites and units, is what Treachery is good against. So I just, outside of a dedicated burn deck, I don't see this Treachery buff amounting to a whole ton.
Okay, that's a good point. I was personally looking forward to trying this out in like a Felnscar control type of shell, but you make a good point that like the deck is already kind of built to be good against units and those type of things.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about some of these nerfs. I think that these are much I don't know about needed nerfs per se, but like much appreciated nerfs at the very least. We have
Hmm.
Red Canyon Smuggler, which is now a 2-1 instead of a 2-2. Hidden Road Smuggler is now a 2-2 instead of a 2-3. And Great Valley Smuggler is now a 2-2 that gets +2/+2 when you have Relic instead of a 3-3 that gets +1/+1 when you have a relic. So it's still the same size when you have a relic, but when you don't have a relic, you're punished a little more in just having a 2-2 smuggler. How do you feel about these smuggler nerfs?
This is really interesting. I guess they're acknowledging that like the smugglers are, it's such a powerful effect that the bodies are just can't be too strong to go along with that effect. It's interesting also that these do see play in a lot of the top decks. Obviously,
Yep.
there's the wind chest decks that have been just a while, and this hits eight cards in the deck because they run 4 copies of the Red Canyon and the Hidden Road Smuggler.
Yeah.
That's a big hit to those decks. It looks like to me. Also, Great Valley Smuggler sees play in the Genève decks. That's another 4 of, and it's going to see a big impact there. Not so much of an impact in like the Rats deck, for example, where they're playing tons and tons of relics. They're going to still get good value from that +2/+2 buff.
Yeah. So I think that the FJS deck takes a huge hit, as you were saying, because there are 8 merchants, and those are getting nerfed. And I think that being able to run so many merchants, like one of the downsides to running merchants is that like, if you were trying to run some of the set 4 merchants together alongside each other, you'd either have to have a market full of multi-faction cards, or certain merchants wouldn't be able to get all the cards. For example, if you have a time merchant and a fire merchant, and you have a mono time card in your market, the fire card couldn't get it. The fire merchant couldn't get it.
Mm.
One of the big advantage of FJS is that you get to play 8 merchants where every merchant can get every single card in the market. And I think that is why the deck was so flexible and robust. And both of these merchants being nerfed, I think, makes it a little more difficult. One other thing is that I've been saying for a while that merchants have the ability tacked onto them. Trade the worst card into your hand for the best card in your deck. That is an incredibly powerful ability.
It's true.
Granted, it does have diminishing returns, but like that effect, if it was on a 3-cost card, probably isn't playable, but it's getting close to it, I would say, right?
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, when you put it that way, right? So having all the merchants, I think that the merchants should be on the level of, say, Winchest Merchant, the 2/2 flyer, something that only costs 1 power on its own. I think that is probably closer to where the merchant should be, rather than like when Hidden Road Smuggler came out and was a 3/3 lifesteal right out of the game. A bit absurd. Anyway, so I'm a big fan of these changes. Great Valley Smuggler, I like this change a lot because it still rewards you if you're playing Great Valley Smuggler in a relic deck, which I think leads to really interesting deck construction, such as the Rats deck, which is just a masterpiece as far as deck construction goes and using synergies. So I like that you're still rewarded. You get a huge Smuggler if you're playing a relic deck. And the fact that it's just a 2/2 instead of a 3/3 now, it doesn't block as much. For a deck that's not thinking about synergies at all, I really like that.
Looking at some of these changes and just how other cards interact with them, like Red Canyon Smuggler now 1 health, it's almost like buffing the snowball.
Yes, it is. Well, that's assuming that people still play Red Canyon Smuggler, and I think the payoff for if you put a weapon on Red Canyon Smuggler is big enough that people still play lots of those. So yeah, the snowball got buffed from the Red Canyon Smuggler, which is arguably going to see more play than the 3 cards that got buffed from 2/1 to 2/2 combined. I don't think that's a crazy statement to make, right? I would expect to see more Red Canyon Smugglers than the combination of Crown Watch Paladin, Desert Marshal, and Recon Artisan.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's still the only smuggler or merchant that attacks for 4 on its own, and like you said, if you put a weapon on it, it still gets very scary.
Yeah. So, that being said, they did, quote, nerf the Jotun Hurler by making it a 3/3 instead of a 4/4. I think that this nerf is going to be very small. It is going to come up, like, Jotun Hurler being a 4/4 means that it beats up on most cards that cost 3 or less, and being a 3/3 means that it'll match cards that cost 2 or 3 a lot of the time. But everyone that was playing Jotun Hurler was playing it for a card that came with a snowball and not the 4/4 Jotun, the 4/4 giant. Or
Yes, I do like this change. In the hero control decks especially, their strategy is to control the game and eventually get a unit to stick, and then play a palace and cast withstand on some unit.
yeah,
And if you're able to interact with a fast spell at that point and kill the unit after they target it with the withstand, then that really helps fight back against it.
yeah.
And so putting this hurler in torch range tools, I think, to fight back against that game plan.
I agree. I think that's a really good point. That being said, we'll talk about the hero control deck in a bit.
But I do agree also, it is a fairly minor change.
yeah. I mean, I think, Jotun Hurler was in a class of its own with Joe, basically, this entire time as being one of the most essential cards you could play in the game. And I think it's still in that class.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting to see them take a similar approach on both of those cards, where they kind of pulled back on the more expensive half of the card.
Yeah, I'm fine with how they've been balancing that. Okay, let's talk about Shelterwing Rider.
Right.
It is now a 0/4, and it was a 0/5 previously. Of course, this means that it's essentially a 5/4 with Aegis, and then it loses all of its attack when it loses the Aegis. This is also rolling back a change previously. I think Shelterwing Rider was once a 0/4.
I remember that. It did not see much play at that point either.
Yes, that's true. But do you think that was... Armory was really big then. This is, to me, a very clear buff to Auric Runehammer. I don't know if that's what that says to you, but to me, this fact that it's a 0/4 instead of 0/5 means that Runehammer kills it now, and that's about it. Like, it might not block some things quite as well, but I think that is the huge difference, because it has Aegis anyway. I mean, it's like, size doesn't matter a whole ton. It doesn't get blocked. It doesn't see much combat in the air. So I think this is all about Runehammer hitting Shelterwing.
I mean, I think that is far and away the biggest impact. There are a few other interesting things that could come out of it too, though. Like, want to buff the Stone Scar decks, and there are a couple of key Stone Scar units that attack for 4 damage.
That is true.
The Haunted Highwaymen. I guess not haunted, just Highwaymen. The other thing I was thinking of is a little bit easier for the Genève decks to answer, since if you can pop the Aegis, the display of Instinct is enough to kill it now.
That's true. Or if you have... Because if you're playing Genève, then Torch oftentimes will kill it, because you have Howling Peak Smuggler out, and they don't have that many answers to it, so...
That's true.
Good point.
I feel like, actually, with these changes to discussed, Howling Peak Smuggler may just be the best one now.
Oh yeah, I mean, they nerfed 3 out of 4. The last one, 3 out of the 5. The 4th one was considered the worst in the 2/2 ambush. Hidden Dune Smuggler, I want to say. So the one that's untouched is probably the best. The better of the untouched ones. Yes, I absolutely agree. I think that Howling Peak Smuggler is probably the best merchant you can play, and it was already very good because of its passive effect in decks that played cards like Torch and Snowball, which go along with it very naturally.
Yeah, I'm excited to Blue Armory deck and see how it goes.
Yeah, let's talk about some of the winners and losers of these changes. So I think, as we identified earlier, FJS is probably the biggest loser in that, half of the units that it just plays naturally are now smaller and easier to kill. It can't protect the Regent's Tomb quite as well, and that's a big part of its game plan.
Yeah, I think I agree. That deck certainly seems like it's taken a step back. I mean, it does get access to Treachery, so like maybe we'll see people trying out some different cards.
Yeah, that's a good point. I could see, something interesting about Winchest is that it plays really well as a defensive deck, except it can't deal with sights, right? Like, you have Rezon to try to deal with sights, but since you don't have a lot of units, and since some of those units don't attack very well, a lot of the time an opposing sight can be very difficult to deal with, and Treachery is one way of answering sights that can go in the deck, as well as answering more units if you have to deal with them. So that's an interesting point there, the Winchest deck getting Treachery. I hadn't thought of that.
So like it's going to need to play around with some new tools, I think. Like maybe Runehammer, target the Shelterwing Riders, maybe Treachery. I wonder if it can still afford to run 8 Smugglers.
Yeah,
or
that's
if they're
a really
just
good
not
question.
good enough.
Because it has a lot more trouble playing Zhou now, and also only half the smugglers can get Zhou out of the market. So FJS is probably still good in some form. We've seen FJS be good basically since set 1, back in the Armory days.
Yeah, it still has tools.
Yeah. So it's probably still good in some capacity. It's just going to have to do a makeover, take inventory on what it can do, and figure out how to adapt them. All right, What do you think of Stone Scar aggro? Stone Scar control? What do you think? Where do you think Stone Scar is? What do you think is viable, and what do you think is good?
That's a tough one to evaluate. I mean, my first instinct is to just kind of try out some of those strategies that used to work, like have some Champion of Chaos and Argentborn Instigator and Bandit Queen, and try to get them down to and finish them off by burning them out with Flame Blast and Obliterate.
Yep.
And goes.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of people are going to start. You also have access to Desecrate, which is an interesting. I don't know if the Double Shadow is going to be tricky for the deck or not. It seems like it's probably not too bad because you could probably play Highwayman. But that seems like a pretty good tempo play as well. If you're just going full throttle and not caring about any damage to you, outracing everything with cards like Bandit Queen and just very aggressive units like Champion of Chaos, then maybe with cards like Desecrate it has enough to out-tempo everything else and get some wins that way.
It's true that you don't have to worry so much about drawing like the right mix of conditional answers when you can run a card like Desecrate.
Yeah, Desecrate and Faceburn. Do you think that Champion of Chaos makes its way into control decks or no?
I guess there have been some Stone Scar control decks in the past, but I'm not entirely sold on Champion of Chaos in a control deck. I feel like there's still enough 1-for-1 answers that I'm just not sold.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, there's still Desecrate, Vanquish, Defiance. Runehammer can answer Champion of Chaos some of the time, but
sometimes.
Yeah. All right. Okay, and let's talk about Huru. So Hojan is untouched. Palace is untouched somehow. I think a lot of people expected a Palace rework of some sort, and we didn't get it. And that was largely believed to be one of the best cards, or certainly like a very format warping card, and it's untouched. Where do you think Huru is? If you're playing a Huru deck, what type of Huru deck do you want to play, and how optimistic are you about Huru's chances?
I think Huru is still very, very good. Probably still tier 1, but hopefully not quite so consistently able to run away with games like it was. And I think that the Shelterwing Rider change will make a difference there. It's now, like you said, vulnerable to Runehammer. That's going to make a big impact. This does tie into Direwolf Digital's strategy that we've seen in the past, where they kind of nerf the cards around what is considered to be a problem card.
Yes.
Like when the Alessi decks were really popular. They never nerfed Alessi.
Yeah, I mean, I never thought that Alessi was a problem, or the Alessi decks. People were just really stubborn in wanting to play cards like Slay and that, but cards like Harsh Rule, which Alessi is supposed to be great against, but that's a whole nother topic.
So we'll see. I feel like I wouldn't be surprised if they do another change in the future that's targeted at pulling these Huru decks back a little bit further. But first we'll see how this shakes out with like Treachery being able to hit sites that might make an impact on Huru as well. So
all right, I'll let you know where I am. I am firmly on the side of I want to play Huru Control. The biggest problem with Huru Control I had was against people that were playing Shelterwing Rider, and now that you can kill a Shelterwing Rider with an Orc Rune Hammer instead of just your Stormhalt Knives, I think that's a huge deal. I think that you can just sit back behind your hammers, sit back behind Defiance Vanquish, and just absorb everything that comes at you with the Huru deck now. Defiance also very good against Champion of Chaos and Argentport Instigator. I think that Huru got a big buff, because the thing about the Shelterwing Rider nerf, it makes the Huru aggressive decks, like the Huru Flyer decks, a little worse, but only really against decks that have answers for an X4 Shelterwing Rider, and that's basically Auric Runehammer decks, or at least that's what it is to me. So I think that this makes the Huru Flyers deck a little worse against specifically decks that play Auric Runehammer, and that means and that means Hru control. I think that Palace not being touched means that Hru control can still run away with games just like it used to be, and that's where I expect to that's the first deck that I'm going to really try in preparation for this next ECQ and see if it's still good, because that's what I have my money on.
That makes sense. It still seems pretty well positioned.
Yeah. So speaking of the next ECQ, next weekend, not this coming weekend, but next weekend is the last ECQ for Worlds. After that ECQ, the only way to qualify for Worlds will be via one of the showdowns, and those people will be qualified beforehand. So for a lot of people, this is their last shot.
Yes.
I certainly had hoped to be qualified prior to this point. I know that actually qualifying is extremely difficult and mathematically unlikely, but I certainly was hoping that I could convert a top 64 into a victory. But this is going to be, we're coming down to the last chances for qualifying for Eternal Worlds.
It's like end of the line here. It's go big or go home, I guess. So yeah, I'm hoping I'll be able to make my way into a top 64 this time. That would be pretty sweet, and I'll be rooting for you as well.
Yes, and the rest of the Friends of Eternal team, we've had pretty good showings in the last couple ECQs, what with Collector top 4ing after already winning one. What a madman. And also Noverb reaching the top 2 during the previous ECQ. So good luck to everyone that is participating in them, and especially good luck to all of the Friends of Eternal. And one more thing, I think that this is the last balance change that we're going to see for a while. I think we're going to be playing a bunch of tournaments with these changes, unless something weird happens. We're going to be playing a bunch of tournaments with this state of the game, basically. I don't think we're going to be seeing a ton of balance changes before the remainder of the big tournaments.
Could be. They did state in their balance changes statement that they seem to be pretty happy with the metagame as far as they had their most diverse ECQ final day so far.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of that is the campaign had just come out, and people were trying all sorts of things, and there wasn't consensus best decks. For example, months after Defiance was out, people were just on oh yeah, FJS and FTP are the best decks. So that the metagame hadn't shaken out.
It's true. Yeah.
Okay, alright, let's move on to our next topic. Rollback on drop campaigns. So last Friday was the final day for drop campaigns that streamers could put out. Have you noticed anything in the difference of the state of Twitch right now?
I guess I haven't paid too much attention to the overall state of things. I imagine that maybe smaller viewership numbers a bit, but I feel like I watch Twitch streams just because I enjoy it. I enjoy seeing the people play. I enjoy seeing what they're talking about. So for me, this isn't a huge change to how I am experiencing Eternal when I watch Twitch.
Yeah, I'm sad about the end of drop campaigns. I thought they were cool. I thought that getting lots of free stuff was awesome. So I mean, I'm sad about the end of that. It looks like the total viewership, I'm looking right now at what the directory looks like, and there's about 900 people, which is maybe a bit lower than it was during the height of drop campaigns, but not by a ton. I mean, you have to imagine that the people that were tuning in then and not now were AFKing a lot of the time. There are still a lot of people that want to interact with Eternal Twitch streamers. I mean, the landscape doesn't seem different. It's just that people aren't having campaigns with huge numbers for one stream. Basically, the stream numbers seem more consistent to what you'd expect.
That makes sense. There were definitely some people who were maybe using a bot or something to collect drops, and now it's not worth it so much. But as far as the number of viewers actively watching and participating, making too much of a hit.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, I'm sad to see drop campaigns go, but it's not the end of the world. I'll still continue to stream. I'll still continue to watch people stream. And I think that's where a lot of people are. I guess most other people are happier than I am to see drop campaigns go, but I don't think it's going to change people's habits that much, is what I'm trying to say, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go on to the last segment of today's podcast. Sunny is not having it. This is not necessarily a controversial topic, but I just want to talk about Moktani, the recent promo, and card evaluation when it comes to especially cards that are really expensive. Hey everyone, what's up? This is Editing Sunyveil. Now, we're about to reach the segment of the show where I absolutely butcher Moknati's name and stat line over and over and over again, and it's really embarrassing. But I still have the same overall opinion of the card as I did, even when I thought the name was different and the stat line was a little different. So I'm going to keep it intact, and you can enjoy the segment where I just look like an absolute buffoon for about 5 minutes. Alright, let's get back to the show. So, Moktani is an 8-cost 7/7. Do I have this right? Is it a 7-cost 8/8 or an 8-cost 7/7?
I believe it is an 8-cost 7/7. That is correct.
8-cost 7/7, Overwhelm, not Berserk, Reckless, and Entomb when it dies, draw up to 7 cards. Draw so that your hand has... Draw up until you have 7 cards, and put Moktani randomly in your deck, so that you can see Moktani again. And I think people see the Entomb effect of draw 7 cards, and are really excited about it, and I understand that drawing cards is a very powerful effect in a card game, but you're talking about something that costs 8. Think about the other cards in the game that cost 8. You've got Temporal Destroyer. You've got Ikaria, the Liberator, which is a nerfed cost. She doesn't see much play anymore now that she costs 8. You've got Talir, who has a combo around her. What else? What other powerful cards am I missing that cost 8 that people play?
I guess there was Caleb in the Charge Rod decks.
Well, I mean,
some playing certain decks. There's Svetya. There's, of course, the Relic Martyr's Chains.
Yeah, Martyr's Chains. That's a big one. That's an extremely powerful... Like, Martyr's Chains is a card that can win games on its own. And there are plenty of finishers that cost 7. Telut, for example, Gear Cruncher is another finisher that costs 7. The Old Joe costs 7. Zalchi costs 7. Like, these cards end the game most of the time that they are played.
Yeah.
And you just don't need to go bigger than that. If you have something that says win the game at 7, and you have a card that says win the game even harder at 8, you might as well just play the one that costs 7 that says win. And that being said, I don't think that Moktani is necessarily that great at winning the game. It's very expensive. It's going to take up your entire turn, the turn that you play it, and it doesn't necessarily block that well because you have to attack with it every turn. Your opponent, if they're at a high life total, which they might be if they're facing against a control deck, can just choose to take the damage and then attack in past the exhausted Moktani and never actually kill it. And plus there are ways of getting around the Entomb effect. Certainly drawing up to 7 cards is a very powerful effect, and if you have something like a Combustion Cell, then maybe you can do some sweet things with it. But I think that drawing up to the cards, unless you have a really, really, really strong way of enabling and capitalizing on it, is not going to have that great of an effect. What's your take on cards like Moktani as control finish?
But before I go into that, I want to say I actually looked up the card, and it looks like it's Moknati. Sorry. And it does have Berserk and Overwhelm.
Berserk and Overwhelm. Okay, well, maybe I will re-record this segment when I get a chance.
Okay.
I'm still going to my overall stance is I don't think that this is a great control finish.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, costing 8 is a lot to ask, and I'm still really tempted by this card because it does seem like you drop a really attacker that can swing for a lot of damage, and if in a controlling deck, it's often on a clear board.
Yeah, and you of can course, control board first. But think about some of the other control finishers, like Telut, which help control the board, or Ikaria, which attacks then blocks, or like Martyr's Chains, which also helps control the board.
Yeah, that's true. Compared to a lot of these other things, like I'm not sure it makes the cut. Big Bear, and that's pretty exciting.
I guess people get excited about Bear. All right, do you have anything else to add?
I will say that I like that they printed this as the promo card because I really enjoyed the bear fight in the campaign.
Yes, we were talking for the episode that came out right after Homecoming. We were talking about how the bear fight was perhaps the best fight that we've had in any campaign. That was a lot of fun.
And that was Moknati versus Vargo.
Yeah. So having a throwback to that is definitely really nice. I'm a fan of that. I just don't think that the card is, insane the way that some people are saying. I don't know how many people are saying that it's, that good even. But I certainly think that when you're evaluating control finishers, cards like this that don't help protect you, cost more than other control finishers, and require a way to capitalize on them in order to actually finish out the game, don't make for great finishers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's talk about what's coming up in the future. First thing, hoodies and shirts are now available. You can get your own Friends of Eternal hoodie or shirt from Inked Gaming. All you gotta do, I would say, either check out the Discord under Team Announcements. We have links for how to get a hold of those. Or you can go into my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Sunyveil, and type !hoodie, and you will get a link to where you can buy Friends of Eternal swag. Also, I am looking forward to returning to streaming, provided my PC stops making such a mess of everything. It's been crashing all the time. I'm going to have to figure out what's going with it. I will do laptop streams, but I'm looking forward to capitalizing on all of my new PC parts once I can get it figured out. And that's it for me. Camomilk, do you have any things you would like to plug, or any announcements, or anything you'd like to say to all the listeners?
Well, check out the Friends of Eternal Discord. It's been a great place to hang out and share decks and just share playing Eternal with people. As for me personally, I think I've streamed twice, so if I ever get a consistent streaming schedule, I'll let you know. But nothing for me right now.
Well, where people will be able to find out if you are streaming is in the Friends of Eternal Discord, right?
For sure. I'll post it there if I ever go online.
Well, I certainly wholeheartedly agree with you that the Friends of Eternal Discord is a great place to hang out and talk about Eternal, get better, learn things from other players, and discover other streamers and content. Camomilk, thank you so much for joining me this week. I know you have to run now, but I think we fit the episode in just barely. So thank you for joining me. Thank you everyone out there listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll see you again next week, and until then, we will see you in the friend zone. Friends of Eternal is a community-based Eternal team dedicated to self-improvement and helping others in their own endeavors. We are an inclusive group and are happy to welcome all comers to our ranks. If that sounds like something you'd want to be a part of, or if you think we're pretty cool and you'd like to hang out with us, go to my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Sunyveil, and type in !FE, and there you will be given information on how to join and how to find the Discord. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, I'll see you in the friend zone.